In just about every medium of entertainment, we follow a hero on his mission to kill the bad guy. It's very rare to see a story where it's the other way around. One notable game to break this mold was Fable, which allowed you to choose whether you wanted to be good or bad through your actions. Though it wasn't the first game to ever allow such a feature, it's one of the more popular ones. Today, we're going to switch roles and become the bad guy in Dungeon Keeper. Dungeon Keeper is a strategy game developed in 1994 by Bullfrog Productions. The idea for the game started when project leader and designer Peter Molyneux was stuck in a traffic jam. If the name Molyneux sounds familiar, it's probably because of a genre called God games, which he has become known for. One of his first games, Populous, is regarded by many as one of the first God games. He's also worked on other high-profile games such as Black and White and Fable. Development on Dungeon Keeper started soon after the idea's inception, with lead programmer Simon Carter using the Magic Carpet engine. A 2D prototype was then developed by Molyneux, which focused on constructing your dungeon along with several variations of rooms you could include. The creation process seemed to fly by once the idea was started. The level editor was being worked on for 6 months after the initial start time. First-person capabilities and enemies came by 10 months, and a year into the project, the levels were being created. The initial goal of the game was for it to be released by November of 1995, with the intent of the game being on shelves by Christmas. It wasn't until September that the team realized it wasn't ready to be released. Molyneux stated that it was just about complete, but they didn't want to release it until it was absolutely brilliant. It was after this moment that the team changed course and started to change the game into a living world controlled by the player. In September of 1996, Dungeon Keeper was shown at the European Computer Trade Show, with the intent to be released in December. Just like last time, the game wasn't quite ready for release, which caused the date to be pushed back once again. Finally, in June of 1997, 2 years and 7 months later, the game was released through EA. When everything was said and done, Dungeon Keeper was a very unique game that got nothing but great reviews. So much so that an expansion pack was released 5 months later to include 15 new levels along with an improved AI system. The opening cinematic has a very Diablo feel to it and shows a knight going into a castle and killing a few imps. An alarm sounds which causes more imps to fend off the hero, who ultimately gets his head cut off by a demon. All of this happens with a pretty intense song playing in the background, and everything about this cinematic sets the tone for the game you're about to play. You're going to hear these next few words repeated throughout this season. There's no story involved in this game. We play as an anonymous, all-seeing entity known as the Keeper. It's our job to create an underground dungeon, along with several variants of creatures, to destroy the hero of the game. The graphics are pretty pixelated for the time it was released. If we do a side-by-side comparison between this and Diablo, which was released only 6 months earlier, we can see that even though both aren't high def, Diablo does seem a little bit more clear. The low quality of the graphics often made us wonder what was going on in the game, as it wasn't that obvious what we were looking at. This also becomes an issue when you go into the first-person view. The music was composed by Russell Shaw, who also provided the soundtrack for the Fable series as well. Atmospheric and industrial sounds were used to give the player a sense of power. Sound fonts were used to provide additional sound effects in the game. However, in order to use these sound fonts, a Sound Blaster AWE32 or AWE64 sound card had to be used in your computer. With a sound font, the player is able to personalize their experience in the dungeons. Most of the game's voiceover work was done by Richard Ridings. Aside from the voice acting, Ridings has also appeared in films such as Who Framed Roger Rabbit and Frozen. Not that one. As with most of the team involved with Dungeon Keeper, Ridings also provided work for the Fable series, along with other games like Tomb Raider and Devil May Cry. We mentioned earlier that Dungeon Keeper is a strategy game. While this is technically true, it's also a hybrid mix of other genres, such as God games, management simulation, and even the first-person shooter. As with many strategy games, your main goal is to create an army large enough to conquer the enemy before said enemy shows up. However, it's up to us to make sure all of the creatures are paid enough, well-fed, and given jobs that they actually enjoy. Gold can be found throughout the dungeon, where you can send your minions to fetch it and take it to your treasure room. If you collect too much treasure, the room will have to be expanded upon in order to store more. At first it seemed like the gold to pay ratio was pretty balanced, But once you get to the longer levels, you quickly realize that you built way too fast and don't have enough money to keep up with the demand. Eventually, you run out of gold mines and you're left with hoping the hero shows up soon before you're completely out of funds. This can be resolved though. If you send out imps to explore the map, sort of like a scout in Age of Empires, you can sometimes stumble upon where the good guys are hiding, which if defeated, you can take the gold they have stocked. Some other minions you can create are beetles, skeletons, and orcs. The list of creatable minions is actually quite extensive, but each one provides specific abilities that either help the workflow or protect your dungeon. There's an equally impressive list on the hero side as well, such as knights, wizards, and tunnelers. Just like with your minions, the good guys also have specific abilities, which means it's not always the best plan to just run in without the correct minions to withstand the attack. Along with minions, you can also create a variety of rooms for your dungeon. These can be anything from a training room to a torture chamber. Each room costs a specific amount of gold per tile, and while every room isn't needed in your dungeon, there are some requirements such as the treasure room and hatchery. Once you get farther into the game, heroes aren't the only enemy you'll have to face. There are also other keepers that will be working on their own dungeons as well. Sometimes you'll even have to fight a hero and a keeper in the same level. There are 20 levels total in the game, with 6 additional secret levels. These secret levels can be accessed by locating hidden world specials in specific maps of the single-player campaign. Navigation around the map is the same as most simulation games, where the mouse needs to go to the edge of the screen to push the map in that direction. Your cursor is your main method of control. Also, just like Roller Coaster Tycoon, your cursor can turn into a hand and pick up your minions and items. The hand also allows you to slap your minions. This mechanic will allow your minions to work faster, but if you do it too often, they'll start to get angry and become less productive. You also have the ability to learn new spells. Some of these spells include speeding up your creatures, creating a disease to eliminate another keeper, or making one of your minions invisible for a short time. One of the key spells that sets this game apart from other strategy games is the Possess Creature spell. Just like the name implies, you're able to possess any minion that works for you. This will take you into a first-person mode where you can freely move around your dungeon. If you possess an imp, you can mine faster, and if you possess an attacking minion, you can control the fight. Which brings us back to the discussion of graphics. When you possess a minion, you can instantly become disoriented with which direction you're facing. The pixelated graphics make it difficult to understand what you're looking at or where you're supposed to be going. We only used this feature once to try it out, and found it more useful to just observe everything from the third person. Although the graphics are subpar at best, we can kinda give them a slide due to the amount of features within the game. It's not very often where we get to play as the bad guy, where our objective is to destroy the hero, and it's actually a lot of fun being on the opposite end of the battle. At times, it seemed like there was a little too much to understand with the game, but with enough of an investment, it feels like it could always provide entertainment. The mix of genres takes this game above and beyond, and in a way, it removes the boring parts of a strategy game. We didn't really dive into all of the features while playing due to personal preference, but the fact that you have so many different options is always nice to see. It's this kind of innovation and uniqueness that allows us to look past the flaws and say that Dungeon Keeper holds up, and should be played if you're a fan of this style of video games. Wow!